When Sam, a young and ambitious engineer, pours his heart into creating a revolutionary invention, he dreams of recognition and success. But his corrupt and greedy boss, Alan Langston, steals the idea and turns it into a multi-million-dollar success, without giving Sam any credit. Humiliated, betrayed, and left with nothing but a meager bonus check, Sam is consumed by rage and vows to take Langston down. What begins as a quest for justice soon evolves into a calculated game of revenge. Sam carefully sabotages Langston's next big project, exposes his lies to the world, and watches his empire crumble. But just as Sam starts to savor his victory and rise to fame with his own groundbreaking product, a shocking revelation comes to light, the truth about the invention that sparked the war. As secrets unravel and Langston resurfaces with a vengeance, Sam finds himself caught in a battle not just for his reputation, but for his entire future. In a twisted game of ambition, deceit, and revenge, Sam and Langston race to outsmart each other, where the winner takes all, and the loser is left with nothing. Who really owns the legacy they're fighting over? And how far will each of them go to claim it? It all started with a spark of ambition, a young engineer fresh out of college, hungry to prove himself in the tech industry. That was me, Sam. For as long as I could remember, I had a knack for building things, solving problems, and dreaming up solutions to everyday annoyances. My latest invention, the smart clip, was going to be my big break. Or so I thought. When I landed the job at Langston Tech, I felt like I'd won the lottery. It was a small but growing company with a reputation for innovation, led by its charismatic CEO, Alan Langston. Langston had a way of lighting up any room he entered, commanding attention with his sharp suits, blinding smile, and larger-than-life personality. He was the kind of man people wanted to follow. I wasn't just impressed, I was inspired. At least, in the beginning. I poured everything I had into my work. Late nights, early mornings, and weekends became routine. While my friends were out partying or traveling, I was holed up in my tiny apartment, tinkering with prototypes and coding software. The smart clip was my baby, a simple but brilliant device designed to locate lost items using a Bluetooth connection to your phone. Attach it to your keys, wallet, or even your pet, and never lose track of anything again. The idea had potential, and I knew it. All I needed was a chance to prove it. That chance came after months of development. I'd perfected the prototype and polished the pitch. My heart raced as I walked into Langston's office, clutching my presentation folder and the smart clip in hand. His office was as intimidating as the man himself, floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city skyline, a massive oak desk with no clutter, and awards lining the shelves behind him. "Sam! Come on in," Langston said, flashing his trademark grin. "What have you got for me today?" "This is something I've been working on for a while," I said, trying to steady my shaking hands. I placed the smart clip on his desk and launched into my pitch, detailing its features, the market demand, and the potential profit margins. Langston listened intently, nodding occasionally. His expression was unreadable, but I could feel the weight of his attention. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. "This is interesting," he said finally. "A solid concept. But it's not quite there yet. Let me hold on to this and review it more thoroughly. I'll get back to you with some feedback." Relief washed over me. "Of course, Mr. Langston. Thank you. I'm open to any suggestions you have." I left his office that day feeling hopeful, even excited. Langston had seen potential in my work, that had to mean something. Over the next few weeks, I kept my head down and waited for his feedback. But as time went on, I heard nothing. Then one morning, I walked into the office and saw something that made my stomach drop. There it was, my smart clip, plastered across a massive digital banner in the reception area. Introducing the smart clip, the ad read, "A revolutionary way to keep track of your essentials. Developed exclusively by Langston Tech." My heart stopped. I felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. I rushed to my desk, pulled up the company website, and saw the same announcement. My prototype, my idea, my countless sleepless nights, it was all there, repackaged as Langston Tech's latest innovation. And my name? Nowhere to be found. I stormed into his office, barely able to keep my composure. Langston looked up from his laptop, a calm smile on his face as if he'd been expecting me. "Sam, I was just about to call you in," he said, leaning back in his chair. "I wanted to let you know that the smart clip is going live. It's going to be huge." I clenched my fists. "This is my invention. I came up with it. I spent months working on it. And now you're launching it without even mentioning my name?" Langston's smile never wavered. "Sam, you're a valuable part of the team, and I appreciate your hard work. But you need to understand how this works. You're an employee. The ideas you develop here belong to the company, per your contract." I stared at him, stunned. "You can't be serious." "I am," he said, his tone turning icy. "And if I were you, I'd be careful about making accusations. This is a golden opportunity for all of us. You should be proud of the work you've contributed." I walked out of his office in a daze, my mind racing. He'd stolen my work. He'd stolen everything. But what could I do? I was a junior engineer, barely scraping by on my salary, with no resources to fight a man as powerful as Langston. I'd signed that contract without thinking twice, trusting that this company was a place where talent would be rewarded. How wrong I'd been. In the weeks that followed, the smart clip became a runaway success. It was featured in tech blogs, magazines, and even on the news. Langston was hailed as a genius, a visionary. He made appearances at conferences, giving speeches about innovation and creativity, all while holding my invention in his hands. I watched helplessly as the sales numbers climbed and his bank account grew. Meanwhile, I received a single $500 bonus check as recognition for my hard work. It was humiliating. The anger simmered inside me, threatening to boil over every time I saw his smug face on TV. I knew I couldn't let it go. I couldn't just sit back and watch him profit off my blood, sweat, and tears. But I also knew I had to be smart about how I fought back. Langston was ruthless, and if I acted impulsively, I'd be the one left with nothing. So I waited. And I planned. I spent hours replaying every interaction, every detail about Langston, searching for a weakness. And then it hit me, his greed. It was obvious in everything he did, the way he cut corners to save money, the way he took credit for other people's work, the way he talked about profits above all else. Langston wasn't just greedy, he was reckless. And that would be his downfall. My first move was subtle. I began gathering evidence, emails, drafts, security footage from the office cameras. Anything that proved I'd been the one to develop the smart clip. I worked late at night, carefully covering my tracks, making sure Langston had no idea what I was doing. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Every night, as I stared at my growing pile of evidence, one thought kept me going: Langston thought he'd won. He thought I was just another cog in his machine, powerless to stop him. But he was wrong. He'd underestimated me. And soon, he'd regret it. The first crack in Langston's empire came during the launch party for his next big product, the Pulse One fitness tracker. By this point, Langston was riding high on the success of the smart clip. The millions it had brought in had inflated his ego to unbearable levels. Employees whispered behind his back about how unbearable he'd become, how he spent more time basking in the limelight than actually running the company. But I wasn't whispering. I was watching. Langston loved throwing these lavish launch parties, with champagne fountains, gourmet hors d'oeuvres, and crowds of investors eager to throw their money at his latest innovation. He stood at the center of it all, grinning like a king addressing his court. The Pulse One was supposed to be the next big thing, a sleek fitness tracker that monitored your steps, heart rate, and even sleep patterns. Langston had hyped it up for months, and tonight was the culmination of his self-proclaimed genius. I watched from the edges of the room, sipping a glass of cheap wine and pretending to blend in with the other junior staffers who had been invited as a reward for our hard work. In reality, I was scouting the room, observing Langston as he schmoozed with investors. He was in his element, laughing too loudly, shaking hands with men in tailored suits, and throwing around buzzwords like disruptive technology and market domination. It was almost impressive how easily he lied. Almost. But as much as I hated being there, the night wasn't a total waste. I overheard a conversation that would prove invaluable. Langston was bragging to a group of investors about how he'd slashed the development costs for the Pulse One by outsourcing the manufacturing to a third-rate factory overseas. "Why pay top dollar for something when you can get it done for half the price?" he said, grinning like he'd just discovered the secret to eternal youth. The investors chuckled, raising their glasses in agreement, but I filed the information away. Langston's greed was predictable, and predictability was a weapon I could use. As the night went on, I slipped out early, unnoticed by the crowd. I had no interest in watching Langston bask in his glory. I had work to do. The Pulse One launched 2 weeks later. On the surface, it seemed like another hit. Pre-orders were through the roof, and the media buzz was deafening. Langston, of course, soaked up the praise, doing interviews and giving speeches about his visionary approach to fitness technology. But I knew better. I'd been quietly inserting myself into the development process for months, working alongside the coding team and carefully embedding subtle flaws in the Pulse One software. These weren't glaring issues, nothing that would be caught in initial testing. No, I was smarter than that. The glitches I introduced were time-delayed, programmed to surface weeks after the product hit the market. By the time the problems became apparent, thousands of units would already be in customers' hands. It started small. Users reported that the Pulse One step counter was inconsistent. Then the heart rate monitor began giving wildly inaccurate readings. Soon, customers were complaining that the device randomly shut off during workouts or refused to sync with their phones. Langston tried to brush off the initial wave of complaints, issuing generic apologies and promising software updates to enhance performance. But the problems only grew worse. Social media exploded with angry posts from customers demanding refunds. Tech blogs that had once praised Langston's brilliance were now tearing him apart, calling the Pulse One a rushed product and a disaster in wearable tech. For the first time, Langston's golden reputation was tarnished. And I wasn't done yet. While Langston scrambled to salvage the Pulse One, I shifted my focus to step 2 of my plan, exposing the truth about the smart clip. I'd spent months building my case, collecting evidence, and preparing for this moment. Now, it was time to make my move. I created an anonymous email account and sent a carefully crafted message to several well-known tech journalists. Attached were all the documents I'd gathered, the original blueprints for the smart clip with my name on them, emails detailing my work, and time-stamped footage from the office security cameras showing me working on the prototype late at night. I laid it all out for them, presenting an airtight case that Langston had stolen my invention and passed it off as his own. It didn't take long for the story to catch fire. Within days, headlines began appearing. The truth about Langston Tech's smart clip, whose idea was it really? Former employee accuses Alan Langston of intellectual theft. Whistleblower exposes fraud at Langston Tech. Langston's PR team went into overdrive, scrambling to control the narrative. He issued a statement denying the allegations, claiming the smart clip had been a collaborative effort and that the accusations were baseless and defamatory. But the damage was already done. The media frenzy was relentless, and public opinion began to turn against him. And then came the lawsuits. Investors who had poured millions into Langston Tech began filing claims, accusing the company of fraud. A few former employees even came forward with their own stories, describing a toxic work environment and unethical practices. The cracks in Langston's empire were widening, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. I watched it all unfold from the sidelines, a mix of satisfaction and vindication coursing through me. For the first time in 2 years, I felt like I was finally regaining control of my life. But I wasn't naive enough to think Langston would go down without a fight. He was a man used to winning, and I knew he'd come after me if he ever figured out I was behind this. But that was the beauty of my plan. Every move I made was calculated, every trace of my involvement carefully erased. As far as anyone knew, I was just another employee who'd quietly resigned a month before the Pulse One launch. Langston was too busy dealing with his crumbling reputation to even notice I was gone. And by the time he did, it would be far too late. I wasn't just out to ruin his career. I was out to destroy everything he'd built, his company, his wealth, his legacy. Langston had taken everything from me. Now, it was my turn. Langston's downfall was accelerating faster than even I anticipated, but I wasn't ready to stop. Watching him squirm under the pressure of lawsuits, angry investors, and the public backlash had been satisfying, but I needed to make sure there was no way he could ever rebuild. I wasn't interested in revenge that would leave him limping back to power a year from now. I wanted scorched earth. After the Pulse One fiasco and the Smart Clip expose, Langston Tech was hemorrhaging money. Refund requests for the Pulse One were pouring in, and production on the devices had to be halted while the company tried to fix the issues I'd intentionally designed to be nearly impossible to resolve. Meanwhile, the Smart Clip scandal was costing him the trust of investors and partners. Deals were being cancelled left and right. But even with his company on the brink, Langston was fighting to stay afloat. He was nothing if not tenacious. That's when I decided it was time to deliver the final blow, the move that would wipe him off the map for good. Langston had always been obsessed with one thing above all else: money. He'd built his company on greed, cutting corners, exploiting employees, and claiming credit for ideas that weren't his. So I figured, what better way to destroy him than by weaponizing his greed against him? I knew Langston was desperate for cash. The lawsuits and refunds were draining his accounts, and his investors were backing out faster than rats fleeing a sinking ship. If he didn't find a way to inject new money into the company soon, Langston Tech would collapse. And that's where I came in. Using a fake identity, I posed as a venture capitalist interested in rescuing Langston Tech. I created an entire persona, Andrew Roth, a self-made billionaire with a portfolio of high-risk, high-reward tech investments. I set up a website for my fictional investment firm, complete with glowing testimonials, stock photos of luxury offices, and a fake assistant who would handle all communications. Langston was hooked immediately. Of course he was. He'd spent years charming investors, and he saw me as his lifeline. I played the role perfectly, pretending to be impressed by his visionary leadership, while subtly hinting that his company's troubles didn't scare me. "I see potential where others see risk," I told him during one of our phone calls. "Your company has taken some hits, sure, but I believe in your ability to bounce back." With the right injection of capital, Langston Tech could become a powerhouse again. Langston practically drooled at the prospect. "Andrew, I appreciate your confidence," he said, his voice dripping with desperation. "I can't tell you how much this investment would mean, not just to me, but to everyone who believes in what we're doing here." What we're doing here? I almost laughed. As if stealing other people's ideas and selling broken products was some noble mission. But I kept my cool, playing the part of the wealthy investor who wanted to help. "I'll need to do my due diligence," I said. "Full access to your financials, current contracts, and projections for the next 2 years. My team will be in touch to schedule a meeting." Langston agreed immediately. He had no choice. For weeks, I strung him along, requesting documents, asking questions, and pretending to deliberate over the investment. In reality, I had no intention of giving him a dime. My real goal was to find the skeletons in his closet, the shady deals, the fraudulent accounting, the lies he told to keep his investors happy. And I found plenty. Buried in the financial reports were discrepancies that painted a clear picture of Langston's corruption. He'd been funneling company funds into his personal accounts for years, disguising the transactions as operational expenses. He'd underpaid suppliers, breached contracts, and even lied about production numbers to inflate the company's valuation. It was worse than I'd imagined. Langston wasn't just unethical, he was criminal. I saved every piece of evidence, carefully organizing it into a damning report. This wasn't just about ruining Langston's reputation anymore. This was about exposing him for the fraud he was and ensuring that he couldn't escape the consequences. But the piece de resistance came when I dug into the outsourced manufacturing deal for the Pulse One. Remember the factory he bragged about using to cut costs? Turns out, it wasn't just substandard, it was illegal. The factory had been flagged multiple times for unsafe working conditions and using underage labor. Langston had signed off on the contract personally, knowing full well what was happening. This was the smoking gun I needed. No investor, no court, no public opinion could save him now. Once my report was complete, I leaked it strategically. First, I sent it anonymously to the journalists who had covered the SmartClip exposé. They were more than happy to dig into the new revelations, publishing scathing articles about Langston's financial misconduct and the exploitation tied to the Pulse One production. Then, I sent the report to the SEC and the Department of Labor, along with a detailed complaint outlining Langston's illegal activities. I made sure to include everything: emails, contracts, bank records, and witness statements from factory workers who had come forward after the Pulse One scandal broke. Finally, I sent the report directly to Langston's biggest investors and board members. These were the people who still had a financial stake in his company, and I knew they'd turn on him the moment they realized he'd been lying to them. The fallout was immediate. Within days, Langston Tech stock plummeted to an all-time low. The media was relentless, with headlines like Langston Tech CEO accused of fraud and labor violations. Alan Langston under federal investigation, the beginning of the end. The dark truth behind Langston's rise to power. Investors pulled out en masse, lawsuits multiplied, and regulatory agencies launched formal investigations into the company. The board of directors, desperate to save what little they could, voted to remove Langston as CEO. But by then, it was too late. Langston Tech was unsalvageable. Langston himself went into hiding, releasing a pathetic statement about being misunderstood and blaming disgruntled former employees for his downfall. But no one was buying it. His assets were frozen pending investigation, his mansion was put on the market to cover legal fees, and his so-called legacy crumbled to dust. And me? I wasn't hiding anymore. As Langston Tech imploded, I launched my own startup, introducing the SmartTag 2.0 to the world. It was everything the SmartClip could have been and more: a sleek, powerful, and truly innovative product. The response was overwhelming. Customers flocked to buy it, eager to support the real genius behind the technology. Within weeks, my company was generating more revenue than Langston Tech had at its peak. And the best part? I made sure everyone knew exactly who I was. Every interview, every press release, every public appearance was a reminder of the truth. Langston had stolen from me, but I'd taken it all back, and then some. As I watched the headlines fade and Langston's name slip into obscurity, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: peace. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about justice. Langston had taken everything from me, but in the end, I'd won. Not just because I'd destroyed him, but because I'd reclaimed my life, my work, and my future. And as far as I was concerned, he'd gotten exactly what he deserved. As the dust settled and my life finally began to stabilize, I thought I had seen the last of Alan Langston. My company, Nextech Innovations, was thriving. The SmartTag 2.0 had cemented my reputation as a true innovator in the tech world, and I'd even started expanding into new projects. Investors were lining up to work with me, the media couldn't get enough of my comeback story, and for the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. But as it turns out, the story wasn't over yet. Not even close. It started with an anonymous email. The subject line read, "The truth about Langston's collapse." At first, I assumed it was a spam message or maybe a disgruntled Langston Tech employee looking to spill more dirt on him. I almost deleted it without opening it. But something about the timing, about how it arrived just as I thought I'd close that chapter of my life, nagged at me. So, I clicked. The email contained one sentence. Alan Langston wasn't the only thief in the room. Below it was a link to a private file-sharing site. My stomach twisted as I stared at the screen. Against my better judgment, I downloaded the file. Inside was a folder labeled Smart Clip, 2017 to 2018, the exact timeframe I'd spent developing the device. I clicked it open and found documents, blueprints, and internal emails from Langston Tech's archives. What I saw made my blood run cold. The documents revealed that I wasn't the original inventor of the Smart Clip. Langston Tech had been working on a similar device before I even joined the company. The early concept sketches looked rough and underdeveloped, but the core idea, the Bluetooth tracking, the mobile app integration, it was all there. The emails told the rest of the story. Langston had ordered the project shelved because it wasn't polished enough. Then, a year later, I came along and unknowingly refined their existing concept into what became the Smart Clip. Suddenly, the puzzle pieces clicked into place. Langston hadn't stolen my idea out of nowhere, he'd seen it as an opportunity to resurrect an abandoned project. That's why he'd been so confident in claiming ownership. Legally, he wasn't entirely wrong. The intellectual property had belonged to the company all along, and I'd been the one to unknowingly perfect it. I sat there, staring at my laptop, as the truth sank in. Everything I thought I'd fought for, my invention, my revenge, my justice, was built on a lie. I hadn't created the Smart Clip from scratch. I'd just been the last person to touch it. For weeks, I couldn't focus. The email consumed me, gnawing at my mind no matter how hard I tried to push it away. On one hand, I told myself it didn't matter. Langston had still been a fraud, and his downfall was justified. But on the other hand, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't the hero of this story anymore. The question that haunted me most was simple: who sent the email? I tried tracing the IP address, but whoever had sent it knew how to cover their tracks. It was untraceable, a ghost in the system. But I wasn't going to let it go. I hired a private investigator, someone with the skills to dig deeper than I could. Weeks passed with no leads. Then, one night, I got a call from the investigator. "Sam, we found something," he said. His voice was tense, like he wasn't sure whether to tell me. "You're not going to like this." The investigator had tracked the email to an IP address registered to a small, nondescript office building in downtown Seattle. The office itself was a dead end, empty, no employees, no records. But the IP history revealed a curious connection: the address had been used to access Langston Tech's private server. Someone inside Langston Tech had sent that email. But the real shock came when the investigator handed me a photograph. It was grainy, taken from a surveillance camera outside the office building, but the face was unmistakable. It was Langston. At first, I thought it was a trick. Why would Alan Langston, the man I'd utterly destroyed, send me an email exposing the truth? It didn't make sense. But the more I thought about it, the more the pieces began to fit together. Langston hadn't just disappeared after his fall from grace. He'd been watching, waiting, and planning. He must have known the truth all along, that the Smart Clip wasn't entirely mine. And now, he was using it against me. But why? What was his endgame? I didn't have to wait long for the answer. 2 weeks later, Langston re-emerged in the tech world with an announcement that shook the industry. He was launching a new company, reclaim technologies. The press release was bold, dripping with carefully crafted vitriol. I've been silent for too long. It's time to reclaim what's mine. The real story of the smart clip, and the lies that destroyed my reputation, will finally come to light. Langston was coming after me. He started granting interviews, painting himself as the victim of a witch hunt orchestrated by a disloyal employee. He spun the story to make himself look like a misunderstood innovator whose original ideas had been co-opted and turned against him. He even produced the same documents I'd seen in the email, proving that the smart clips concept had existed before I joined the company. The media, hungry for scandal, ran with it. My reputation took a hit almost immediately. Overnight, I went from being the tech world's golden boy to a subject of heated debate. Had I really stolen the smart clip? Was my success built on someone else's work? For the first time since this all began, I felt like I was losing control. Langston's comeback was gaining traction, and I had no idea how to stop it. Then, one night, as I sat alone in my office, staring at the blueprint of the Smart Tag 2.0, I realized something that chilled me to the core. Langston didn't just want to rebuild his reputation. He didn't just want to ruin mine. He wanted to take back everything, including my new company. The next morning, I woke up to another email. This time, it wasn't anonymous. It was from Langston himself. The subject line read, "Let's talk." And the message was clear: "You know the truth now, Sam. You know what you did. I can destroy you if I want to. But I'm willing to make a deal. Let's meet and settle this, before it's too late for both of us." For the first time in years, I felt fear creep into my chest. Langston wasn't just coming for me. He was coming for everything I'd built, and this time, I wasn't sure if I'd be able to stop him.